Okay, so welcome back, everyone. Today we have another guest speaker, Dr. Stefan Battle from the Rhode Island College School of Social Work. And so as with our other guest speakers, we ask first that Dr. Battle, you share your personal story and then professional story. And then if students or mentors or teachers have questions as he's talking, you can type them into the chat. And we will, in the second half, you have a dialogue Q&A so that we can get your.
Do you want me to go to probably about 12 o'clock?
Yeah, that's normally what we do, but we're kind of flexible. If you prefer to pause in the middle of your presentation and ask questions and talk, we can do that too.
All right. I'm not really good at doing this, telling about myself, so I'll do the best I can, and then you folks can ask all the questions you want to ask. Let me see. So oh my goodness, hello. I am Dr. Battle, and I am a social worker, and I'm trying to figure it out right now, but I've been a social worker.
You're doing the math?
For 29 years.
Wow.
I've been a social worker for 29 years. I'm not originally from Rhode Island. I am from Massachusetts, born and raised. Love Massachusetts. For the western part of the state, I don't know if any of you know the western part of the state or been to the western part of Massachusetts. That's the Springfield, Berkshire area. Born and raised out there. My parents are Southerners, were Southerners. Unfortunately, they're passed away. I am born into a family of helping professionals. And what I mean by that is my sister and brothers who are much older than me. My sister passed away some years ago from cancer, and my brothers live in Connecticut. We are all social workers. We all went to school for social work. And then my brothers and I got advanced degrees after that. I have one brother who has a master's in social work, a master's in public health administration, master's in public health, and then a PhD. I have a brother who has a master's in social work and a law degree, and then I have a master's in social work and EDD, doctorate in education. And my sister was thinking about it, but she didn't do it. She had a master's in social work, and she had a private practice. So we kind of all excelled what our mother and our parents' expectation was for us. Our parents wanted us to, because they grew up in the time when both of them lost their fathers when they were teenagers, just beginning of their teenage years. They had to stop and work and help the family. My parents, particularly my mother's goal was her children, and she always said this to anybody who would listen to her children were going to get a college education. Well, we all did, and we all exceeded that expectation of her part. So I'm very happy to be part of a family of helping professionals, and we got that from our mother, who we all were raised in the church, and she never said it, but she modeled it for us, that you give back to your folks, you give back to your community. And she really instilled that, obviously, in all four of us, because all four of us became social workers, and then did different things in terms of being social workers and other advanced degrees. I cannot imagine any other career than to be a social worker. Before I got my master's, I thought about getting a master's in education. And so I kind of weighed the two together and figured out that social work was the best thing for me. And I've had opportunities as a social worker, but never derailed or never stopped being a social worker. I never changed, like I went from social work to another kind of discipline. I always have been a social worker. In that realm of being a social worker, I've had different jobs and responsibilities. For example, now I'm an instructor, but never thought about leaving the field. And I enjoyed being a social worker, and I will leave this world being a social worker. So I enjoy the profession. And I enjoyed the profession because it allowed me to do whatever I wanted to do as a helping professional. Social work is a very flexible degree. You can do anything you want. We are everywhere. We are in business, we are in education, we're in academia, we're in medicine. where I was a school social worker for many years. I mean, you can find us in different places. So it's a very diverse degree. And if you tailor it to the way you want it, you can have a lot of fun, which I've had, and have a lot of wonderful experiences, which I've had, and meet a lot of wonderful people that will help you along the way to become, I think I have been a really good social worker. So I cannot imagine not being a social worker or leaving the field. Prior to being in academia, I've only been in academia for the past 10 years. Actually, I just celebrated my 10 years this past May. I wanted to give back in a different way. My social work career was pretty much working with children and families, particularly Black families and Black males, and I've enjoyed that. But I wanted to do something different. I was a little itchy, and I still wanted to be a social worker, but I wanted to do it in a different way. And so I did this kind of a bold move, and I sent a letter to the chairperson at the MSW program at Salem State College, but now it's called University. Told her my experience, blah, blah, blah. And of course, she said, oh, I'll get back to you, not thinking she would. Well, lo and behold, she did. That particular year, and that was 2010, someone, an adjunct, something happened, for personal reasons, whatever, and she pulled out my file and said, would you be interested in teaching 2 courses? And I said, absolutely. So from that came my career of being in academia, because the next year they hired me full-time as a kind of a placeholder, because their BSW program, there was 2 people who were leaving on sabbatical, so they needed like an interim person. So I was there for a year and enjoyed very much. The next year, I got the gig at Rhode Island College. And I've been in Rhode Island College since 2013. Got tenure in 2018 and have enjoyed being there. And I chose Rhode Island College because it's a small college. I don't know if any of you have been to the college, know much about Rhode Island College. I know, Aaron, you're there, and Aaron may agree with this. It's a very small, intimate college. And one of the things I like about it is that our students go and have courses with different people on the campus. So if I know a student has Aaron as an instructor, I can pick up the phone or email Aaron, and we can have a conversation about the student, because Aaron knows what I'm talking about, because she's had that intimate relationship with Aaron. We're that small that we all know each other's students in some respect. And that's what I like about it, because it's that helping professional of being able to know your student and know their needs and know what struggles they come with when they come to college. Our students come with a lot of, and again, Erin can speak to this if she'd like to, a lot of our students come to college with a lot of trials and tribulations. But somehow they manage to get there, and somehow they're very present, and somehow they are ready to go and do what they want and be successful and graduate with whatever degree they graduate from Rhode Island College. My love for doing the work I do is I'm a researcher, and I do a lot of writing about Black males, the challenges and struggles of Black males. I've written some articles about it. I'm actually in the process of writing a book right now about it. And I just love my research that I do in terms of working and interviewing and talking with Black males. The stories are similar. The stories are the same, which is heartbreaking, but it's important to get the message out there, particularly what's happened in the last couple months. I'm sure you all watched the news or talked among yourselves in terms of your friends or families. With George Floyd, it's becoming more and more visible, and the message is getting more and more out that racism is unfortunately alive and well in this country. And sorry if anybody who is a Trump person. We do not have a president in our White House that is helping with putting the fire out. Actually, he's putting more coal into the fire. And that's my personal view. Don't want anyone to join me on that. So I enjoy writing about race and racism, and I enjoy talking about Black men and getting the word out. Obviously, being a Black man, I have firsthand experience about it. So I've enjoyed being a social worker, and I've enjoyed academia. I don't think I could have been in a better place right now in terms of my career. I really don't. There's more opportunities for me, but being in academia and teaching, and what I like to say is giving back. I tell some of my students that you're going to pick up where I left off, from where I left off 10 years ago from practicing in terms of social work. You folks are going to be the ones that pick up and continue to do the good work I did prior to that, because someone did that for me. That's the giving back part. Someone did that for me. Someone took me underneath, many people took me underneath their wing, guided me, taught me, showed me, and said, now go forth, do the good work while I go and enjoy retirement. And that's my goal for my students, is to give back, because that's what I was raised and taught by my parents, is to give back. I'm not sure what else to tell you.
Well, let's pause so we can have some interpretation. That was quite a long
All right.
stint there. No problem. And so while I don't know if Roberto or
Yeah,
Karen
I can
will
translate.
do it. Okay. Others can think about questions and type them into the chat.
All right. Well, welcome, Dr. Battle. Thank you for your introduction. I'm just going to translate. My name is Roberto, one of the co-coordinators in this amazing program, this one-year program. All right, Dr. Battle, él es el Dr. Battle, es trabajador social, está en la universidad o el colegio de Rhode Island College, en el programa de trabajo social. Su introducción, él dice que no es algo, tipo de conversación no es algo bueno para él, pero va a intentar, hoy va a hacerlo lo más posible, lo mejor posible. Él ha sido trabajador social por 29 años, es de Massachusetts, no es de Rhode Island, es del oeste del lado del estado de Massachusetts. Sus padres son del sur, ya que han pasado, no están presentes en este mundo, pero ellos fueron alguien que lo ayudó a él a hacer todas las decisiones que él hizo. Él creció en una familia de trabajadores sociales. Sus hermanos y él recibieron educación muy avanzada, ya que muchos de ellos recibieron doctorados y maestrías, ya sido en ley y, como en este caso, trabajadores de social. Él pensó en alcanzar, para él fue muy importante que, como su mamá era una persona de la iglesia, y les enseñó a toda la familia que necesitaban quedar a la comunidad. Él piensa que toda su familia pasaron las metas que su mamá tenía para ellos, que era dar para atrás a la comunidad, ya que todos sus hermanos, como dije, que son trabajadores sociales. Para él, la carrera que tiene ha sido muy bien para él. Siempre ha sido trabajador social. Esta es una carrera donde puedes ir en muchas rutas, te puedes dirigir dependiendo en qué es lo que tú quieres hacer. Porque el trabajo social puede ser usado con familias o en trabajo de negocio, o sea que tienes muchas opciones. Después de esto, él se enfocó en la academia o en la educación. En el 2010 trabajó para MSW, donde en un tiempo él decidió mandar una carta de trabajo a la persona que estaba encargada en la MSW o la MCW, y diciéndole que estaba interesado, y no sé lo que pasó, dice, pero uno de los profesores que estaba enseñando ahí no pudo hacer, y después la persona encargada le dio una llamada a él y le ofreció el trabajo, que era corto, y después de eso recibió el trabajo completo. Y después de eso, él fue a Rhode Island College, donde está ahorita en presente. La razón por qué le encanta Rhode Island College es porque es una universidad o un colegio muy pequeño, y donde, siendo la universidad y el colegio muy pequeño, le da la oportunidad de conocer a todos sus estudiantes. Muchos estudiantes vienen a Rhode Island College con muchos desafíos, pero logran percibir algo bueno. La cosa que le encanta investigar mucho es escribir sobre hombres de color, especial hombres negros. Él le encanta escribir sobre razas y el color de las personas. Es algo que está haciendo ahorita presente, y está escribiendo un libro. Y es muy importante para él porque ahorita estamos en un tiempo donde el racismo está muy presente, y es importante escribir sobre estas historias. Y por último, él dice que siendo profesor, lo que le quiere enseñar a sus estudiantes es que ellos aprendan también dar a la comunidad, porque él piensa que cuando él termine de trabajar y se retire o jubile, los estudiantes o sus estudiantes van a tener que seguir las metas o lo que él está dejando detrás, y ellos tienen que dar más a la comunidad, empezando desde ese momento. And I think that was it.
That was a
Thank
lot.
you.
That was great. I think you got everything. So I asked if folks would type questions into the chat, and we have one. So if there are more questions, please type them into the chat as we go. I don't know if you want me to read that, or if you.
I can see it. No, I can see them.
Yeah.
Actually, I can see them. So first, I want to thank the folks who found my story inspiring and insightful. There's a question here from, I think it's Lily. Am I right saying that? So you asked, what did your day look like as a social worker? So if you ever have the experience of, like, you wake up in the morning, you think, I'm going to do this, 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 and this. Well, forget about it. Because with social work, and particularly a school social worker, you can come in the building and think you're going to do this. I'm going to see this client at 10. I'm going to see this client at 10:30. I'm going to do a group at lunch. I'm going to blah, blah. No. No. You have to be prepared to come in with your schedule and prepared for your schedule to fly out the door or out the window, because a crisis will always happen with social work in some respect. Now, you may luck. Now, and I'm not saying this every day. You may have days when you will be able to live and stick to your schedule. But there are days when you have to actually be very, very flexible, change whatever you have because someone's in crisis or something is going on that needs to be dealt with. So I've had to do crises with kids. I've had to sometimes, kids will come to me about a situation they've either had with a friend or at home. I've had to consult with different agencies, organizations, to make sure that kid stays safe. One of the primary goals of social worker is, the primary rule is, when particularly with kids, but everybody, safety. You want to make sure a person is always safe when there's a crisis they present to you. So that's the first frontal part of your brain, is making sure a person is safe. So you've got crises that you need to deal with. You've got issues that you need to deal with. Sometimes you have many meetings that you have to go to. It's a very thinking on your feet kind of job. It's a very much thinking. It's a very isolated kind of job. The reason why I say it's isolated, particularly for school social workers, I have students who will come to me and say, I want to be a school social worker. When I get my bachelor's, I want to go right into school social work. And I discourage them from doing that right away, because when you become a school social worker, if you ever have the luxury, and I mean luxury because I really enjoyed being a school social worker. I really, really enjoyed being a school social worker. But being a school social worker, I had other responsibilities and other duties at other places I worked at before to give me the experience and the know-how to be a school social worker. What I mean by having that independence and being thinking on your feet is it's a very lonely job because you might be the only school social worker sometimes in the building, where normally in a building you have many teachers on different levels. So you always can consult with them or talk with them. As a school social worker, you might be the only one in the building. And in some cases, the next school social worker may be the town over, not necessarily in the same district that you are employed. So you have to rely on other people in different aspects of your professional life to help you with sometimes issues as a social worker. So do you want me to slow down and stop now, or?
I can translate that. La pregunta fue si nos puede dar una idea de cómo es su día de trabajador social. Y él dice que como siendo trabajador social, no puedes tener un horario que tú despiertas y dices, ok, hoy voy a tener mi desayuno, voy a ir a la oficina, voy a trabajar, voy a hacer estas cosas. Dice que eso no ocurre siendo un trabajador social. Es un tipo de trabajo donde estás trabajando y tú vas a dejar lo que estás haciendo y vas a asistir a las personas que tienen crisis o las agencias que tienen crisis. Él ha trabajado con muchas familias y agencias donde ha tenido que hacer eso, que ha estado trabajando y de repente recibe una llamada y él tiene que dejar todo lo que está haciendo y se va a asistir a crisis. Él dice que este tipo de trabajo es donde tú debes de estar pensando con tus pies, y lo que él quiere decir por eso es que tienes que ser rápido con tus pies al escuchar que si hay un crisis o no hay un crisis. Pero él también dice que sí hay oportunidades, que vas a tener tu horario, vas a hacer lo que tú tienes en tu horario, pero muchas veces nunca es el caso así. También dice que para ser un buen trabajador social en las escuelas, tú debes de tener un poco de experiencia, ya que a veces estando en el edificio tú eres el único trabajador social y a veces el siguiente trabajador social no puede estar tan cerca como el otro condado o el otro estado. Para cerrar esto, él dice que es un trabajo donde debes de pensar con tus pies. Thank you.
So I'm going to answer the questions that I'm seeing here in the kind of chat room, and then I'm going to let the translator translate after. So the next question, so the question I asked so far, what was it like my day-to-day? Was that sufficient, Lily, for you?
I was going to ask if you could elaborate on what crises you had to deal with, or.
Okay, so I'll give you an example. The last school I worked at, and I'm just going to preface, I wanted to take every kid home with me, but I couldn't. But I had one young man. He was in kindergarten. He was a kindergartner, and he had ADHD. We were kind of figuring out, was it ADHD and conduct disorder, but we kind of pretty much said it was ADHD because he just could not sit still. He just could not focus. His parents refused medication for him, and we were trying to tell them, we need to think about it. And I understand it's very scary when someone approaches a parent and says, your child's having trouble and that we need to maybe think about him or her being on medication. I've had those kind of conversations, and you can tell the look on the person's face is like, no, I don't want to do that, or like, what, my child? And there's some denial. There's denial about it, and I totally respect that. This young man Literally, I could clock him every morning at 10 o'clock. And this goes back to what I said earlier. I had a schedule that I had in my head, but because of him, my schedule was thrown out the window. I could clock him at 10 o'clock every day. His kindergarten teacher would say, I'm going to call him Matt. That was not his name, but I'm going to say Matt. Matt's acting up. He's crawling underneath the seats. He's throwing objects underneath the chairs. I had to take the kids outside the hallway. He's a danger to himself, and he's a danger to the kids. I had to go down to the classroom, kind of coerce him to come with me. Sometimes it was willing, sometimes it wasn't. Go to the restraining room with him to give him a timeout. Sometimes necessarily, and when I say restraint, I was trained to be a restrainer. So I had this time to restrain him because he was so much out of control. Calm him down and then get him back. That sometimes took an hour to an hour and a half. So now I started at 10, it's 11:30. I bring him back to his classroom. I go back to my office, pick up where I left off at 10 o'clock. I get another call, 20, 25 minutes, got to go back to the same classroom. He's acting up. Same thing plays out. By the time 3 o'clock comes around, which the kids were dismissed, I have done nothing to spend pretty much my whole day with him. That's the kind of situation. Or when a kid comes to me and says that his parent or someone has hit him, and I start probing, what do you mean hit you? And they give me some examples, they give me the story. Then it comes down to, remember I said talk about being safe? Now it's no longer safe, he's no longer safe. So now I have to consult with the principal or assistant principal about the story, ask the parent to come in, possibly, maybe notify the local child resource, the local child, like DCYF, and probably have to have the child removed from the home depending on the severity of the abuse. Those are kind of situations. Those are unpleasant situations. But those are the reasons why I became a social worker, because I want to make sure the kids were always safe. No one should hurt a kid. A kid's a very vulnerable individual. They have impulsivities. Kids are kids. You were a kid. But to hurt a kid for no reason is not okay. And those are the reasons why I became a social worker. So does that answer your question?
Yes, I wanted our students to have some specific stories about what a social worker does.
Okay.
So I think that gives some insight. So thank you so much.
Okay. So I'm going to go to the next person. And they asked me about if I ever had an encounter with racism. And unfortunately, yes, I have. I am a male. I'm a Black male. If you have seen, heard, know the history of Black males in this country, we have been targeted in terms of our issues around racism for no reason but the color of our skin. So I'm going to tell one story, and I'm going to tell it slowly so the translator will be able to translate afterwards. So none of you were born in 1982, I don't believe. And so I was Aaron was. So I was a freshman in college at Boston University in Boston, Massachusetts. I don't know if any of you have ever been to Boston or know Boston University. So this particular evening, I was going to meet a friend, a female friend. She was a white female, and she lived off campus. She did not live on the dorms. I lived on campus. She lived off campus. I tend to walk very fast. It's just my nature. And the reason why is when I was younger, my sister, who was much older than me, she was 20 years older than me, and she passed away. She used to say, if you want to go with me, you got to keep up with me. So I wanted to go with her, so I had to keep up with her. So I walked very fast as she walked very fast. This particular evening, I was late getting to my friend's apartment because we were going out for dinner. So I was walking very fast. It was around 5, a little after 5, so people were coming off of work. And Boston has a subway system. They call it the T. So I was walking in Kenmore Square, which is a big hub near Boston University. Fenway Park is right down the street. It's a big hub. There was a white woman coming up from the subway station. I was behind her, maybe 2 feet, maybe 3. She was walking in front of me. I was behind her. I was walking fast. She looked and turned her head and saw me and started to run. Literally, she started to run. Now, I'm from Springfield, Massachusetts. Small, it's supposed to be the 3rd largest city in Massachusetts. I don't know why, because there's nothing there, but anyways. So I'm from Springfield, Massachusetts. Now, I never experienced issues around race and racism until I went to high school. So as my mother would say, I was pretty naive, and I was pretty naive this particular night. I literally stopped in my tracks, watched her run. I didn't even notice the people around me if they saw what happened because I was so stunned and amazed what was happening to me. Like I'm like the least authoritarian person you could see if you met me. But she took off like a jet. She turned around, saw me that I had not proposed any danger to her, saw the kind of the blood coming out of my face of horror, turned to me, mouthed, "I'm sorry," and kept walking. I didn't have enough time to even notice that people were like, notice what happened, to feel embarrassed or even ashamed. But in my book that I wrote, and I wrote about this in another article too, there was a level of embarrassment and there was a level of shame for me because I didn't get it. Why are you running? Why are you running from me? So that was that was one story. There's many others, but that was one story I thought I would share with this individual who asked me if I've ever experienced or encountered race or racism. So I'm going to stop.
Okay, thank you for sharing. I'm gonna go back to what you shared earlier about the student and the kindergartner. Gonna go back a little bit to that. Después voy a responder a la pregunta sobre cómo era su día. Lily quería saber qué son unas cosas que él ve siendo trabajador social. Y lo que pasó o lo que explicó fue que él dice que no puedes tener un horario y la razón es porque dio la explicación que él cuando un día fue a trabajar, recibió la llamada de un estudiante que es del kinder que tal vez tiene la disabilidad de ADHD donde no puede estar sentado o estar en un lugar. Y el caso de este fue que sus padres no le querían dar medicamento para su disabilidad. Cuando él estaba en el trabajo, la maestra lo llamó diciéndole que el estudiante no estaba a salvo y estaba haciendo cosas fuera de control. O sea que él tuvo que ir a la escuela para ayudar al estudiante y al saber del tiempo, habían pasado 30 minutos y después regresó a trabajar a la oficina y otra vez le mandan otra vez a decir, o la maestra le llama para decirle que otra vez el estudiante está haciendo la misma cosa. Y lo que está diciendo el doctor es que este es un ejemplo donde él tiene que salir de la oficina todo el tiempo y a veces él pasa mucho de su tiempo yendo a ver estudiantes con estos casos. Y otras cosas que él también hace es que cuando recibe llamadas sobre niños que dicen que sus padres le han pegado, para él es algo también muy importante porque para él es importante que los niños estén a salvo y cuando alguien le está pegando es algo que debe de tomar acción rápidamente. Y ese es uno de los otros casos que también él va y empieza a hablar y investigar y hacer todo el papeleo para saber qué es lo que está pasando y para poner a ese estudiante a salvo, porque eso es muy importante para él. La otra pregunta fue que si él se ha encontrado con racismo, y él dice que claro que sí, ya que tiene su piel de color, es un hombre de color. Él explicó una de sus memorias en 1932, siendo un estudiante de la Universidad de Boston. Él es una persona que camina rápidamente. Había un día que iba a visitar a su amiga, que su amiga es blanca, y al salir durante el tiempo donde todos están saliendo del trabajo y saliendo del tren subterráneo, él sabiendo que estaba un poco tarde, empezó a caminar, ya sabiendo que él camina un poco rápido, empezó a caminar y él se dio una nota que había una mujer de color blanca. Lo miró y al mirar que él estaba caminando un poco rápido, ella empezó a correr. Y después, al alcanzar a ella, a la persona, mirando que él no le iba a hacer nada, volteó y después le dijo, oh, lo siento. Pero él dice que él, como fue un poco ciego de no ver el racismo en ese tiempo, casi no entendió que lo que había pasado hasta ahora, que entiende que como la señora que era de color blanco mirando a un hombre de color caminando rápido, a ella se le puso en la mente que, oh, me va a atacar o va a pasar algo. Y eso es lo que quiso explicar, que sí, él se ha encontrado con racismo y este es uno de los ejemplos que él quería darnos a nosotros hoy. Thank you.
Thank you. So now I'm going to kind of combine a couple of questions here. So one person asked me here, have you ever had a client trigger something inside your life? And I'm going to combine that with the other question with the person asked, is it hard to be a social worker? The young man that I talked about, who I would have to go back and forth and get out of the classroom, the kindergartner, one day he triggered me. And I actually lost it. He recognized that he was out of control. He was very bright. He recognized he was out of control, and he said to me something that made me feel like he knew it and that he just wanted to belong with the other kids. He just didn't want to be this person that people have labeled him. And what I mean by labeled him, not only his peers, which is kind of typical, but also the teachers, which you expect a little bit more from, were starting to label him. I remember when he was going from kindergarten to first grade, the school did meetings with the up and coming new teachers. So like in this case, he was leaving kindergarten, he was going to first grade. So the kindergarten teachers would meet with the first grade teachers to talk about their new students. And pretty much it was a pretty reasonably small school. So everyone knew each other, but not to the degree when we have these meetings of kind of transition. All the first grade teachers, it was horrible. All the first grade teachers said, I don't want him in my class. I don't want him in my class. I don't want him in my class. Like, oh my God, this is a student who's in trouble. Emotionally, organically, he's in trouble, and we're all like dismissing him because his parents won't do what needed to be done. Eventually they did, but at the time they weren't. So he triggered one day for me something he said, and I started to cry. And I knew it was wrong for me to give him a hug because we got to respect the boundaries, but I couldn't help it because I knew this young man knew he was out of control and he just wanted to like hold himself and be in control. He just wanted to be in control. And he knew he couldn't because of his own impulsivities and his own way of being able to function. he knew that he needed help and his parents weren't going to help him. So I lost it that day. I lost it that day. And he looked at me and he started to cry and I started to cry. I'm like, okay, this is not working. But that's one time in my life but that's not just one, but that was one example I'm giving you of something that was really hard for me and how a student triggered me.
All right. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm.
Doctor Barrow, la pregunta fue que si ha tenido un cliente o un estudiante que le ha afectado durante su trabajo. Y hablando del mismo estudiante del kinder que él ha estado hablando esta tarde, él dice que hubo un día donde él lo llamaron otra vez y que él fue a hablar con él y hubo un momento donde el niño quien no puede estar en un lugar que siempre tiene que estar moviéndose, hubo un momento donde el niño reconoció que estaba haciendo cosas malas y que necesitaba ayuda. Y también dijo que él quería ser como los otros estudiantes que eran buenos y que él no quería ser el nombre que le habían dado a él, que es un niño que es malo y hace cosas malas. Él ya no quería ser una persona así. Después el doctor Barrow quiso decir que antes de entrar a la escuela, muchas de las maestras conocían a este estudiante y cuando estaban hablando sobre este estudiante particularmente, todas dijeron que no querían aceptar a este niño porque sabían cómo era y finalmente una de las maestras lo tuvo que tener, pero dando esa historia, cuando el doctor Barrow escuchó que el niño estaba tratando de decirle que sí necesita ayuda y no quiere hacer las cosas que él está haciendo, es cuando él empezó a llorar porque le afectó mucho lo que había dicho el niño, porque reconocía que este niño, aunque no podía estar en un sitio, ahora este momento estaba en un sitio diciendo que necesita ayuda, no quiero ser como los demás. Y como él no, el doctor Barrow empezando a llorar y sabiendo que no podía abrazarlo, de todos modos lo hizo. Y este es uno de los ejemplos que quería darnos a saber que uno de sus estudiantes o clientes sí lo ha afectado durante su trabajo. Thank you.
So Aaron answered a question, and someone someone after Aaron asked a question about biases. So I'm going to combine these two together. I was a very compliant child when I was growing up. If you knew my mother, you would be too. Lovely woman, lovely woman, but no one to play with. So I was very compliant. But when I got older and more in my groove with my own career, particularly in social work, I broke a lot of rules. And I'm kind of referring to what Aaron said in terms of protocols. There were a lot of white social workers who would say they understand about race and racism, and they did not. There are a lot of white social workers who would say they understand about cultural diversity and inclusion. They did not. They did not belong. They did not understand the way Black families work, how they cope, and how they survive. They did not. They pretended they did. They thought they did. They thought they were experts around it, but they were not. I remember a situation when I was working at a child welfare agency in Massachusetts. And there was a young mother and she had two boys. It was a residential home. And it was a residential home. So there was a day placement and a residential home for kids who actually lived there. Kids who actually lived there were really difficult to manage in home or in school. Day placement, they were reasonably able to deal and work with, but not in a school setting, but they went home at night. So they were like a school bus. They came to the school, went to school, and went home. But the residential kids stayed there for a period of time. And I had 10 clients who were all in residential homes, in the residential part of this facility, and they were all boys. I had one group. I had two boys who were brothers, and a mother who was fairly young, very young. She was, as we used to say, she was a kid herself. The DCYS worker in that time was a middle-class, white male, very privileged, authoritarian individual who knew better and differently than I did. And this comes back to what I was saying about being compliant. He wanted her, she had a difficult time coming to the place where I worked, where her boys were at, attending meetings, being on time for meetings, whatever. She was doing the best she could. And she would say to him, I'm doing the best I can. Her transportation was limited, et cetera, et cetera. He wanted to hold that against her. And he wanted to hold that against her in the sense of taking her parental privilege away from her. Basically, taking her kids away from her, putting them in foster care, and then eventually adoption. That's how privileged he was. That's how unaware he was of the cultural dynamics of a Black mother and a young Black mother. So I laugh now. It wasn't funny there because I thought I was going to lose my job. But anyways, I was on the phone with him and I screamed at him. I literally screamed at him. And I looked around and said, who is saying this? Where's that person coming from? Where's that voice? And it was me. It was me. I was like, because I was a compliant person. I was literally screaming at him. He got so mad at me, he hung up the phone with me, which was perfectly fine, and immediately called my supervisor, who was a white woman, who didn't get it either. So here I am, white woman man, white woman. I'm like, really? But with her, it was a little bit more that I don't get it, but I get what you're saying to me. So I didn't get reprimanded for it, but that was my proudest moment when I screamed at him, because it was like, I'm not screaming at you to scream at you. I'm screaming at you for you to get it. Do you understand this woman is doing the best she can? Do you understand this woman is trying to make it right for her kids? And you're trying to hold it against her? That was not okay for me. So when he saw me every once in a while, he came to see. And another thing too, he wasn't compliant himself. He didn't come to see the kids all the time, which he was supposed to. So like, hello. So it worked out. The moral of the story is she did her job. She did a good job, and her kids finally went home to her. I know that was long, I'm sorry.
It wasn't long enough, it was great. All right. La pregunta fue sobre parcialidades, si hay personas que sí siguen las reglas o no siguen las reglas. Él dice que creciendo, él siempre escuchó a su madre, pero al crecer y siendo un adulto, empezó a romper muchas reglas. Y la historia que dio a decir fue que cuando él tenía un trabajo donde tenía 10 clientes en un lugar donde los estudiantes tenían una residencia donde vivían y habían 10 clientes y dentro de estos 10 clientes habían 2 hermanos con quien él trabajó. Y estos 2 hermanos tenían una madre que era muy joven y para ella se le hacía algo muy difícil asistir a las juntas. Trabajando junto al Dr. Battle había otro trabajador social que es de la raza blanca. Y para él se le quería hacer algo más fácil y teniendo privilegio, él decidió o quería usar la irresponsabilidad de la madre que no podía ir a asistir a las juntas, de tal vez quitarle a sus niños y que pudo tal vez resultar en ir a ser adoptados o todo el papeleo sobre eso. Y a Dr. Battle eso no le gustó después de escuchar eso y después de hablar con los niños. Fue a su oficina y le dio una llamada y le gritó y le dijo, ¿por qué estás haciendo eso? Tú no sabes todo lo que está tratando de hacer la mamá. Ella está tratando. Y lo que hizo el hombre de piel blanca fue que le colgó y le llamó a su gerente, que también es otra persona quien es de piel blanca. Ella no lo hizo perder el trabajo, lo despidió, pero dijo que sí entendía lo que estaba tratando de decir. En cuento corto, lo que quiere decir que es importante que hay a veces que no vas a seguir las reglas porque hay muchas personas que están tratando de hacer lo más posible para obtener sus familias juntas. Y en esta historia eso es lo que pasó. La mamá alcanzó a obtener un trabajo y por último pudo tener a sus hijos de regreso a su casa.
I want to also stress too, the last story I shared, I was talking about this gentleman who was white and my supervisor, female, who was white. And I want to stress in my own writing, when I talk about white people, I say some. And I emphasize some because I don't mean everybody. There will be, I'll use myself, I won't speak for you all. There have been individuals who have been white, men and women, who have not been kind to me for no other reason for the color of my skin. I can say my name, I have my education, all those things. That didn't matter. Just the color of my skin, for some reason, not liked, or derogatory statements are made. Then I have people in my life, and those I've worked with who are white, who have been wonderful, who get it, who are allies, who don't know what they don't know and will tell you, I don't know what I don't know, but I need you to help me know because I want to know better. Those are wonderful people. So when I say white people, please don't think it's all. And in your life, just think of some, because there are some wonderful white people who are really there. If you go back, and all of you weren't, but I was born in the early 60s. So Dr. Martin Luther King was still very much alive until he was assassinated in 1968. If you go back and look at some of the pictures or some of the footings of him marching, there are white people, mixed of races walking with him. So I just want to emphasize that because I don't want you to leave here thinking that Dr. Bell thinks all white people are bad. I don't. But you will have to say that historically, there have not been kind white people in people of color, not just black people, people of color's lives. I want to, there was one person, someone said about trauma. I can't remember who was. In the book that I write, I'm talking about vulnerability and racial trauma. And for people of color, your racial trauma will always trigger some sort of vulnerability. You'll always be, unfortunately, I won't say you, I'm me. I'm always looking over my shoulder. I'm always prepared for some comment to be made. On a daily basis, we as people of color live with what is called microaggression. Someone will say something with good intentions, but it's not good intentions. Some will say something that they think may be appropriate is not appropriate. We live with these microaggressions every day. I have colleagues who we joke about it because sometimes that's how we cope with it, but sometimes it's not always funny. But we live with microaggressions all the day. I say from the time I wake up in the morning to my activity during the day until the time I go to bed, there is some element of some sort of unfair comment directly or indirectly made about me or to me from not maybe someone I know, just by listening to television, reading something on social media, which I'm not sophisticated with, but we are always vulnerable to our racial trauma because of just who we are, for no other reason, unfortunately, the color of our skin. Is it hard to overcome microaggressions? I don't think you ever overcome someone's cruelty to another person. That's my opinion, but I don't think you ever overcome. And sometimes the microaggressions are conscious. Sometimes the microaggressions are unconscious. I'm talking more of the unconsciousness. And then when you try to explain to the person that was not okay, then they turn it back on you. And now it becomes your problem. That's not fair. So I don't think you ever overcome people's lack of awareness and our deliberate cruelty, to answer that person's question.
All right. Ok, Dr. Varo quería decir, darles a saber que cuando él está hablando sobre personas de piel blanca y él está diciendo que son malas, él quiere decir que no todas las personas son malas. Quiere decir que hay algunas que son malas. Porque él dice que hay personas de la piel blanca que, aunque él va y se comunica con estas personas, aunque él tenga un doctorado o tenga una educación, solo por ver el color de su piel no lo aceptan. Pero hay otros que son aliados y que como sus compañeros de trabajo, que son personas que tratan de entender y lo aceptan por quien es. Y esas son las personas que sí son las personas de piel blanca que son buenas. Él también quería decir que en los 60s, cuando todavía vivía el doctor Martin Luther King Jr., tú puedes ver las fotos donde él iba a huelgas y en esas mismas fotos puedes ver personas del color de la piel blanca. Hubo otra pregunta sobre trauma. Él dice que escribiendo su libro, él ha escrito sobre la vulnerabilidad y trauma. Él piensa que siempre está, para una persona de color, siempre está contigo. La persona siempre está mirando sobre su hombro cada vez. Siempre escuchan agresión microscópicas que pueden ser directamente a esta persona o a su raza, o solamente escuchando otras personas comunicándose sobre eso. Siempre hay comentarios negativos. Y él dice que para responder la pregunta si podemos o pueden sobrepasar estos tipos de trauma, él piensa que no, porque solo con nuestra piel que tenemos va a haber mucha trauma y vulnerabilidad en este mundo. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, thank you so much for sharing all of this. We're a little bit over time, but I wonder if I can ask one last question, and then we'll kind of wrap up. And then we normally have our closing community meeting. So after that, we'll let you go. But I'm just curious if students are interested in going into the field of social work. What might you recommend for them entering into high school now? And then like what would the path be then?
I would suggest that you all volunteer, do some sort of volunteer work. And I would suggest that you do volunteer work in sort of passion of an area that you want. Work with kids, work with the elderly, whatever, something like that. I also strongly suggest, besides volunteer, is that you look at some sort of social justice action project or something to join. that really will give you a good sense of social work. I'm not saying that the volunteer part will not, but the social action will give you a really strong sense. Something that you passionately believe in, with domestic violence, criminality, whatever, to get yourself out there and join some sort of organization that's doing some work around it. Protest, whatever. I mean, Black Lives Matter, whatever. Get out there and be part of it. But so volunteer, and maybe you can do this all in one. Volunteer in a social action project or organization. But those two is really important. To volunteer, to get a sense of being a helping professional, and if this is something you want to really do, and also some sort of social action.
La pregunta,
Thank you.
oh.
No.
La pregunta fue que si hay unos estudiantes que están interesados en ser trabajadores sociales, ¿qué les sugieres a estos estudiantes que ahorita van a entrar high school o la preparatoria si quieren hacer estos tipos de trabajo? Y él les sugiere que sean voluntarios o que y que busquen algo que tengan una pasión, ya que sean trabajando con niños o con personas de edad mayor, o que sean parte de organizaciones de justicia social. Estas son las dos cosas que él sugiere, que es que seas voluntario para saber y conocer cómo se siente de dar a la comunidad y de ser parte de una organización que pelea para un caso que tú estés muy interesado. Thank you.
Gracias.
Someone just asked me, you can work almost anywhere with a social degree?
Oh, I think, yeah, she's commenting.
Yeah, you can.
Yes.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Yes, you comment. Yes,
And
you can.
Melly's in the MSW program right now. The one.
Oh.
I am, and you can use
Good for
social
you.
work for everything.
Yes, you can. So there you go. So, someone validates me. There you go.
That's right.
There you go. So I want to say thank you for allowing me to talk with you, share my stories. I'm a big storyteller. My mother was a big storyteller, so I got it honestly. So I hope you enjoyed my stories. I have more. And Aaron, if you ever want me to come back, or if the students ever want to reach out to me, Aaron has my email address. I would be more than willing to chat with you again. But I hope this was helpful, and I hope that you all got something out of it.
Thank you so much for spending the time with us. And yeah, if anybody does want to reach out, I will share your email with everyone.
Take care.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.